We've all been there. You've been craving a particular food for a couple of weeks. You suddenly pluck up the nerve to decide to make a dish on your own, but then you navigate to the sea of recipe blogs on the internet and you're bombarded with autoplay ads, exit intent pop-ups, and videos all over the place that take forever to load. It's a plague of the internet, most recipe blogs, and that's why today we're taking a stab at finally redesigning the single recipe page on the Food Network's website. So we're going to take a stab at it today. Here we've got the brand guidelines, nothing crazy, really nice reddish pink as kind of their main accent color. I think they're using Georgia as their kind of header font, which is okay, you know, it's a little overused and generic, but we can make it work. And they're using some kind of Franklin font for their body font, and I've just swapped it out with Libre Franklin because it's very performant and obviously quite accessible. It's a free font alternative that we can use. So here's what we've got so far. Obviously just the reference image, really not so bad, right? Like this is, all things considered, really not that crazy. But there is quite a lot of wasted real estate, and like all of this space, I'm scrolling like three. If you're imagining you have a phone in your hands, you're going 1, 2, 3 just to get to the ingredients. And then if you're in the store trying to get these ingredients, how the heck are you gonna, these aren't organized at all. There's just a big list of ingredients. You're jumping around to different parts of the store trying to buy a whole bunch of different random ingredients. Then I'm scrolling over even more ads, hitting the directions. It's okay, right? But there's so much we can do to improve it. And here we've got the stories. Like this is what we're going to use to synthesize a new design. The big one is, of course, as a user, I want to know how to recreate a particular dish at home. So I want to make a nice shrimp scampi or shrimp linguine or something with shrimp in it for some reason. I also want to, in order to achieve that, I need to know which ingredients should go in the dish. I need detailed instructions on how to prepare those ingredients. I need to perhaps watch a video of someone else making the dish, maybe. And then also, in addition to kind of the main goal here, I need to understand how long this recipe will take to prepare, so I know if I'm jumping into like a 4-hour crock pot endeavor or just, a quick microwave meal. I want to understand how many people it will serve and adjust accordingly. I need to know if, this is a notable recipe of sorts. Is a celebrity known for making this dish? This is like probably the least important story here. I also want to know what others have said about this recipe before I make it, because maybe it's just a crap recipe, right? I need it to be crowd vetted before I'd be willing to touch it with my spatula. Maybe I want to bookmark it for later if I'm like an all-time Food Network champion. I have an account there and everything. And then I want to print the recipe. Or maybe I just want to stick it to my wall so I can reference it without using my phone and get my phone covered in like sticky shrimp parts. So that's it. Gonna take a stab at this, and I'll keep you posted with all my decisions as I go, as usual. And hopefully we come up with something really sexy when we're done. Talk to you in a minute. Here I'm realizing that I have the wrong color for the Food Network logo here, and I'm using a Figma plugin called Color Overlay, which lets you put a color on top of any sort of image, to much like you would do in Photoshop. Super useful. I'll share it in the YouTube description if y'all want to check it out. You can do so much for the feel of a UI by just getting the iconography right. And oftentimes the default material UI components and icons that I'm using are just a little too thick for the feel I want. And I want a more friendly, kind of lighthearted feel here, so I'm using the feather icons that have that very light stroke. Instead of those previous recipe and next recipe buttons in the header in the existing site, I wanted to give users a way to switch both between the cuisine and the protein type. Because I feel like if you get those two things right, you're going to be able to find a recipe that you're really interested in eating that night pretty quickly. And here we are again with this label value pair pattern, where we're using a small, lighter label and a much bigger value to showcase important structured information for people. In this case, the duration, the difficulty, and eventually any dietary restrictions. One frustration of mine is how static some of these recipe websites are when it comes to serving sizes. Given that we're on the web, we can kind of interact with components these days. It doesn't make sense that I have to adapt my serving size for the night to whatever happens to be being displayed on the site. So giving the users the ability to control the serving size, I think, is a big win for the experience of using a recipe blog. And this here's another pet peeve of mine. I don't understand why recipe blogs will often just list all of the ingredients at once in one huge block without any structure. When I'm going through the store and I'm holding my phone with all these ingredients, I kind of need to know what ingredients are associated with each other and kind of generally what their category is. That way I can just go to an aisle, grab everything I need for that recipe from that aisle, then go to the next aisle and get everything in one contained place instead of ping-ponging around the store. This to me is like a really simple improvement that improves the usability of these kinds of recipe sites significantly. I can't tell you how many times I've been so enthusiastic about a particular recipe, go to the store and buy all the ingredients and come back just to realize that I don't have the cookware I need to build this kind of recipe. So putting that at the top, I think, is important. It's a good way to safeguard the user from committing to a recipe they don't actually have the tools to build, and making sure that it's collapsed by default also allows us to not infringe on the primary user experience here. And although I'm very functional in the way I design things, I don't like to put a lot of design flair into the stuff that I build. I'm realizing here that I'm building a recipe blog, and people eat very emotionally, right? When you're choosing what it is that you're going to have for dinner that night, oftentimes a very, very high quality picture of that food is what ultimately helps you decide, like, okay, this looks delicious, I'm going for this one. So kind of have to have some kind of quality, high-res imagery of the dish on the page somewhere. I'm just trying to now figure out how to include that emotional side of things without infringing too much on the information architecture. Here you see I am once again trying to help users with selection of the recipe and before they actually go to build it, recreate it at home. Some people have dietary restrictions. I personally have celiac disease, so I need to know if there's wheat in something. So it's kind of silly that wasn't front and center in the old experience, and I'm just floating that up to the top and placing it where it makes sense in the nice gray metadata box. Now you you might be able to see how reluctant I am here to do this, because my intuition at first was that people that are just trying to get a quick dinner together don't really care about the author of the recipe, right? I mean, does it really make a difference? But I'm also thinking like people that are really enthusiastic about the cooking space probably have a couple of chefs that they look up to, and when selecting a recipe, if they knew if their particular chef is the one that assembled the recipe, they'd be much more likely to select it. So I'm including the author here, but just subduing it and making it much smaller than it is in the existing UI. And finally, I'm getting all of the actions that users can perform on this recipe together. And as you'd expect, my first instinct is to go for the floating action button in the lower right. That's like my go-to, here's where you do actions heuristic for any kind of mobile UI. But I actually spent about an hour going back and forth on different ways to do this, because there's just simply too many actions to float on the screen like this. And ultimately, I think I decide on putting the buttons in line, but at the end of the day, I really feel like there's probably a more nuanced solution here, because you don't necessarily need the actions until you've finished the recipe sometimes, but if they're after the ingredients and directions, you might miss them and not know that they're there. So difficult design problem, that's for sure. Ultimately just decided to just choose one solution arbitrarily so that I could finish this redesign. Oh, a little bit of a designer in me dies when I have to do this, but I'm going to force myself to stop. As you probably saw from the last part of the recording, I was just going back and forth between lots of different options for how to handle the action controls in this particular flow. But at this point, I think we've kind of we've added a layer of UI polish that's like really modern and clean, in addition to giving the recipe more function than it did before. So I think the biggest value adds are, instead of kind of a stale, hard to navigate set of breadcrumbs, we allow users to switch between cuisine and protein contexts, which allows them to explore recipes in two different veins that are usually important to people when they're picking a recipe. You've got all the metadata here explained in a really simple, clean way to consume. I'll know from both the picture and the reviews and metadata here whether or not I want to continue scrolling. I've got the controls here. Still not 100% sold on whether or not it makes sense to put them here, but it's really hard to miss them when they're here. And then, of course, giving users a way to quickly switch between the number of servings they want from the ingredients list. Actually organizing the ingredients list such that if you go to the store, you can grab everything in one section at once instead of pinging all over the grocery store. And then, you know, nothing really crazy's changed with the instructions, but ultimately I think if we're talking straight usability, we definitely need to break these instructions up into smaller bite-sized steps. But that's it for now. I'm happy I finally got to do a recipe blog. They're notorious for having really, really bad UX on the web. But yeah, this is of course my interpretation of how these kinds of blogs should exist. Let me know if you have any thoughts, or if you would rather approach this in a different, more modern way. I'd love to hear any thoughts on that. But as always, if you have any crap UI out there that you want me to redesign, pop it in the comments and I'll get to it in the next episode. But until then, have a lovely week and I'll see you next Tuesday.